I didn't plan to ruin anyone's night until my manager made sure I didn't exist. The moment I saw the guest list with my name missing, something went quiet inside me, like a fuse burning down to a cold wire. I'm not dramatic by nature. I don't throw scenes. I document. I fix. I build systems no one notices until they stop working. But that night, the part of me they kept ignoring learned how to speak. I work in a mid-sized company where success looks like a slideshow, charts that climb, bullets that gleam, a room of people nodding at the right cadence. My title is forgettable on purpose. Operations and client enablement, one of those roles that lives in the seam between departments. If sales promises something impossible, I turn it into a plan. If delivery is drowning, I design a lifeboat. My inbox is a triage room. My calendar is a puzzle. I don't have power on paper. I have leverage that only shows up when things are on fire. My manager, let's call her C, loves rooms where the camera finds her. She smiles like she's carrying the company on her shoulders, then hands off the weight as soon as the meeting ends. If you've worked in an office, you know the type. Allergic to details, magnetic to credit. Her compliments feel like stickers they give kids after flu shots. Bright, disposable, easy to peel off when someone more important walks by. The project that made this story possible started as a problem no one wanted. Our churn was rising. Quietly at first, one client sliding away here, an invoice put on hold there. Support was answering the same questions on repeat. Sales blamed implementation. Implementation blamed scope. Finance stared at red numbers and said nothing. I don't like watching slow leaks. I map the holes. I built a simple model. If we cut the average time from issue raised to owner confirmed by 48 hours, and if we stopped bouncing tickets between teams, we could reduce churn by 3 percentage points in a quarter. It wasn't a miracle. It was a checklist. New intake form, a triage stand-up every morning, shared SLA board, an escalation rule that sent my phone buzzing when something hit. Hour 36. I wrote 3 SOPs, recorded 2 looms, drafted 1 email for C to send under her name because it needed authority. She never changed a word. It worked faster than I expected. Customers didn't send love letters, but they stopped leaving. The board slid from orange to yellow to green. The CEO quoted our improved responsiveness in an all hands, like it had arrived from a cloud. C started saying things like, the framework I designed with the team. I let it go. I was tired, but the good kind. The kind where you sleep like the spreadsheet, finally balanced. Then the calendar invite landed. Q3 celebration, success dinner. A sleek restaurant, the kind that hides the price on the right. Attire, cocktail. Purpose. Recognize leadership effort and key contributions. My email stayed quiet. The invite list trickled through the grapevine in the way these things do. Who got the nod, who got next time, and who was assumed covered by department. I refreshed my inbox twice, then stopped. I told myself I didn't care. I wrapped up a triage case at 8:40 p.m., closed my laptop, and stared at the ceiling until the light felt mean. The next morning, C called a prep huddle. Let's keep messaging tight, she said, flipping through note cards like they were cue sheets to her own documentary. Our turnaround times improved because we aligned on accountability. I waited for the part where someone says, hey, what about the process work, the daily triage, the thing we actually used? No one did. Someone asked if the dessert would be plated or family style. C smiled at me over the rim of her coffee, like we shared a joke I didn't know we were telling. At lunch, the operations floor had that floaty mood offices get before a party the whole company doesn't attend. People dress nicer than necessary. Voices get rounder. A junior AE stopped at my desk and said, You're coming tonight, right? I half shrugged. He looked confused, then guilty, then wandered away. 10 minutes later, he pinged me a screenshot. Blurred names, just the header line where mine should have been. Sorry if that's weird, he typed. You should be there. I typed all good and deleted it before sending. I typed it's fine and deleted that too. I sent nothing. By 3, my phone lit up with a client escalation. Their integration had failed mid-billing cycle. Old me would have asked to push it to tomorrow. Instead, I opened the dashboard and started picking at the knots. API keys misaligned. A hidden field that split an account ID at the dash. 2 emails. Later, we were stable. The client wrote, "Didn't expect such a fast save, thank you." I stared at that line longer than I should have. The day's only honest sentence. At 5, C swept through in a soft blazer, the kind you rent for panels. "You okay to hold the fort?" she asked, already pivoting toward the elevator. I looked at the stack of things that would become fires by morning if left alone. "Yes," I said, "because that's what my job sounds like." She touched my shoulder like she was blessing a farm animal and said, "You're a star." She didn't wait for my face to catch up. I could tell you that being excluded hurt because of ego. It didn't. It hurt because of math. I knew where the work lived. The 7:10 a.m. calls, the boring edits, the unglamorous refusals that keep a project from promising what it can't do. I knew who had stood there with me. Their names weren't on the list either. They sent me Slack messages with sideways jokes and little knives hidden inside. "We're the ghost team, huh?" I answered with thumbs-ups and silence. And at 7 I walked past the restaurant. Not on purpose. It's on the way to my train if I add 6 minutes and one wrong turn. The windows were tall and clean enough to be rude. I saw our people floating under gold light. I saw the CEO raise a glass. I saw C standing with her chin up like a hymn. The host asked if I needed help. I said no and kept walking. I don't know when the decision settled. Not at the window, not on the train. Somewhere between unlocking my apartment and feeding the cat, a plan landed with the soft click of something that already fit. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg for a chair at a table that pretended I didn't exist. I was going to make the event tell the truth. Calmly, cleanly, with receipts. Truth in offices rarely lives in speeches. It lives in timestamps. If you want to know who did the work, open the version history. If you want to know who saved the account, read the midnight notes. The celebration was built on a story. That leadership led, that alignment aligned, that process changes happened because someone with a microphone said they should. I had the other story, dates, names, pull requests, stand-up logs, a trail of edits that started at my desk and spread outward like a careful fire break. I didn't need to make anything up. I just needed to make it visible. Before midnight, I had a folder on my desktop labeled Q3 Actual. I'm not reckless. I stripped client identifiers, masked data, kept it internal safe. I pulled the triage board burn-down chart, the one I screen cap nightly out of reflex, and stitched it into a 2-minute reel where you could watch the backlog shrink the week the SOPs went live. I clipped 3 call snippets where frustrated customers turned neutral, then satisfied after we changed our handoff script. I exported a page from the shared drive showing C's framework file with my name in the author history like a watermark no one ever looks for. I didn't write a manifesto, I wrote a caption. What improved responsiveness actually looked like. No adjectives, no accusations, just evidence. I queued it to the internal lounge channel for 8:13 p.m., late enough that the toasts would have happened, early enough that people still had their phones on the table. I added 6 names under mine, the ghost team, and asked them to review. I didn't tell them what to feel. I told them what we did, when and how it moved the needle. The mouse hovered over schedule. I had a thought I'm not proud of. Will this make me unemployable? Then another, or will it make me finally visible? I clicked. The hard part wasn't the file. It was sitting still. I washed a plate I'd already washed. I paced. I reread the SOP that started the shift and found a sentence that annoyed me. At 8:19, the first DM arrived. Is this supposed to be posted right now? At 8:21, holy hell! At 8:22, a typing bubble from someone in compliance that vanished, then reappeared with, Do you need me on standby? I said no. We weren't exposing secrets. We were showing our work. I don't know exactly how it landed at the restaurant, but I can guess. Someone checked their phone in the restroom and came back quieter. A pocket buzzed under a table, and a face changed shape. The first public comment under the post wasn't mine. It was from a senior engineer who rarely speaks in channels. This is the most accurate representation of Q3 I've seen. Then a project manager, we stopped losing a week on misrouted tickets after this launch. Then someone from finance. Revenue lift correlates to that Friday the SOP went live. Can confirm. No one tagged C. No one had to. I didn't sleep. Not from adrenaline. From clarity. I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I was done being erased in the name of optics. If a celebration needs to exclude the people who did the work to make the story clean, it isn't a celebration. It's a costume. I had spent a year sewing the seams in the dark. That night, I turned on the light to see if the fabric held. By morning, my post had more reactions than any policy memo this year. That means nothing and everything. Hearts don't fix pay bands. Fire emojis don't rewrite org charts. But in places like ours, attention is currency, and for once it wasn't in C's account. She walked in later than usual, eyes bright and voice scratchy, and called a 10 a.m. debrief. "Great energy last night," she said, smiling too wide. "Let's align on next steps after our successful quarter." I closed my laptop lid halfway and listened to the room breathe. You can hear when a story loses its narrator. Pages stop turning. People stop leaning in. I wasn't angry anymore. I was precise. If the company wanted to celebrate leadership effort, leadership was about to be defined in a new tense by the people who paid the cost of getting it right, not the ones who held the mic at dinner. I didn't know yet exactly how the night would end for C. I didn't even know if anyone would say her name out loud. I just knew this. They had excluded me to keep the surface smooth. I had pressed one button and the surface told the truth. And once a room hears it, it doesn't unhear it. I wish I could tell you that being overlooked at one time was the worst of it, but it wasn't. My manager, let's call her Diane, had a way of turning invisibility into an art form. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She didn't even criticize me directly. She did something worse. She pretended I wasn't there. The project we had worked on was grueling. Months of late nights, endless revisions, and a mountain of research that would have buried anyone else. I had carried more than my share willingly because I believed in the work. I wrote the key proposals. I handled client calls when Diane didn't have time. And I stayed long after the office lights dimmed to make sure deadlines were met. And yet, when the results came in, when the numbers were better than anyone dared hope, Diane stood in front of the boardroom, with a smile plastered across her face, accepting applause as if she had lifted the weight alone. "Her leadership was incredible," one of the directors said, clapping. "We couldn't have done this without you, Diane." I sat 3 seats away, heart pounding, waiting for her to turn and at least nod in my direction. A single glance, an acknowledgement that I had been the one burning midnight oil while she left at 5 sharp. But she didn't. She adjusted her blazer, smiled at the praise, and moved on. That was the first time I felt something crack inside me. The next weeks were worse. She began to shift my responsibilities in small ways, stripping me of tasks that gave visibility and replacing them with grunt work. Draft this, double-check that. Sit in on meetings just to take notes. I tried to brush it off, stay professional, I told myself, but it's hard to ignore the way coworkers start to notice when your contributions vanish. I'd hear whispers in the break room. "Didn't she used to lead that client account? What happened?" One afternoon, I overheard Diane talking to a partner while I passed the hallway. She laughed lightly, saying, "Oh, I had to redo so much of her work. She's good, but still learning." Still learning. After years in the role, after everything I had done to carry her across the finish line, I froze, gripping the folder in my hands so tightly my knuckles turned white. My chest burned with humiliation, not just because of her words, but because of the casual ease with which she said them, like I was disposable, replaceable, a shadow. The final straw came 2 weeks before the celebration. We were all crowded into the conference room when Diane announced it. We're throwing a company event to celebrate our success. Her smile stretched wide, polished, fake. It'll be a night to remember. People clapped. Excitement buzzed through the room. Someone asked about invitations, and she rattled off names, listing departments, partners, even interns who had barely touched the project. My name never came up. At first, I thought maybe it was an oversight. Surely she wouldn't exclude me from celebrating the very success I had bled for. But when I glanced at her, our eyes met for the briefest second, and in that split moment, I understood. It wasn't a mistake. She had done it on purpose. The humiliation sat heavy in my chest like lead. I couldn't even meet my coworkers' eyes. Some looked at me with confusion, others with pity, and a few quickly looked away, not wanting to be caught in the awkwardness of my exclusion. That night, I went home and sat in silence, staring at the glowing city through my apartment window. Anger pulsed in my veins, mingling with shame, but underneath it all was something sharper, resolve. If Diane thought she could erase me, if she thought I'd let her rewrite the story of this success as hers alone, she had no idea what I was capable of. Because that was the night I decided. If I couldn't be part of her celebration, I would make sure she never got to enjoy it either. The office buzzed with energy in the days leading up to the celebration. You could feel it in the way people dressed a little sharper, in the way conversations drifted toward outfits and menus, in the way Diane walked through the halls like a queen preparing for coronation. Everywhere I turned, there were whispers of the party. "Did you see the venue?" someone said, eyes wide. "It's that rooftop downtown, the one with the glass ceiling." Another gushed over the catering menu, scrolling through pictures of champagne towers and hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce. I pretended not to hear. I nodded when people talked about carpooling to the venue, and I smiled when they joked about dancing until sunrise. I played along like I had been invited, but the truth hung in the back of my mind like a bruise you can't stop pressing. I didn't have an invitation. I wasn't meant to be there. Diane, of course, was glowing. Every meeting she led turned into a rehearsal for her big moment. She polished her speech, practiced her timing, and made sure everyone knew exactly how her leadership had brought us to success. One afternoon, she stood in front of the team with that perfect corporate smile plastered on her face. "This event is about all of us," she said, "about the teamwork, the commitment, the alignment. All of us, except me." I sat at the edge of the table, scribbling notes no one asked for, feeling invisible in plain sight. The thing about being excluded isn't just the absence of invitation, it's the presence of silence. People avoided bringing it up around me, but I could feel it. The way conversations halted when I walked by, the way glances darted quickly in my direction and away again. My coworkers weren't cruel. They just didn't want to get caught in the middle. One evening, as I was gathering my things, I overheard two colleagues whispering in the break room. "Why wouldn't Diane invite her? I don't know. Maybe she wants the spotlight. But she did half the work. More than half." Silence. Then softer. "She deserves to be there." I froze outside the door, my heart pounding. For a second I wanted to walk in, to confront them, to scream that I deserved more than just pity whispers behind closed doors. But I didn't. I walked away, my chest tight, my teeth clenched. The final insult came the day before the event. Diane stopped by my desk, her heels clicking against the tile, her perfume sharp and suffocating. She leaned down slightly, lowering her voice just enough to make sure no one else could hear. "I'll need you to stay late tomorrow," she said sweetly, "just to handle some client support tickets while we're out." It wasn't a request. It was an order. She wanted me at my desk while she toasted with champagne above the city skyline. I nodded slowly, keeping my expression neutral, but inside something snapped. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was clarity. Diane didn't just want me excluded. She wanted me invisible. erased, silenced. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen, scrolling through the event details I wasn't supposed to see. A colleague, probably without thinking, had left the logistics file open in a shared folder. Venue schedules, catering deliveries, speech drafts. It was all there, sitting in plain sight. And that was when the idea started to take shape. It wasn't about crashing the party. It wasn't about begging for recognition. No, if Diane thought this night would be the pinnacle of her career, I would make sure it became the moment her mask slipped in front of everyone. I had the receipts, the real data, the project logs with my name stamped all over them, the emails where I had written the plans Diane later presented as her own, the timelines that proved who carried the weight. She wanted a celebration built on lies. I wanted the truth to have a seat at the table. And suddenly, for the first time in weeks, the humiliation didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt sharp, useful, like a blade being honed. The celebration wasn't just Diane's moment anymore. It was going to be mine too. The morning of the event felt heavier than usual. The office hummed with nervous excitement, every corner brimming with whispers about outfits, after parties, and who would be sitting closest to the CEO during the toast. Even the interns were buzzing, adjusting their ties in the bathroom mirror, as if the celebration was a ticket to legitimacy. I sat at my desk, unseen as always, but my mind wasn't anywhere near the spreadsheets in front of me. My mind was on the folder I had carefully curated over the last week. Screenshots, timestamp records, email chains, project drafts with my name etched into the metadata like invisible fingerprints. Proof. Cold, undeniable proof. While everyone else was picking out cocktail dresses and rehearsing fake laughs, I was planning something else entirely. Diane strutted through the halls like a monarch awaiting coronation. Her hair was styled to perfection, her blazer pressed sharp enough to cut. Every time she stopped to chat with someone, she'd flash that polished smile, slipping in subtle reminders of her big night. At one point, she stopped by my desk. "Don't forget to cover those tickets tonight," she said in that sugar-coated voice of hers. "I'll text you if anything urgent comes up." The cruelty of it almost made me laugh. She wasn't content with excluding me. She wanted to rub my face in it, reminding me that while she basked in champagne and compliments, I'd be tethered to a screen, invisible and forgotten. But Diane didn't know that the very files she thought buried in shared drives were the ones I had already dug up. She didn't know that I had every receipt neatly organized, every hidden trace of my work ready to be brought to the surface. She didn't know that the celebration she had built on lies was about to collapse from within. By lunchtime, my plan was no longer a vague idea. It was a checklist. Step 1. Finish compiling the evidence. Step 2. Draft a clean, concise presentation of the truth. Step 3. Deliver it at the perfect moment, when every pair of eyes would be watching. I wasn't reckless. I knew better than to rant in anger or throw accusations without proof. That was the beauty of what I had built. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't even need to be in the room. The truth, once shown, would speak louder than any toast Diane could make. I opened the folder I labeled Q3 Actual and reviewed it one last time. The project timelines showed the exact dates when new processes went live, with my name logged in every single version history. The email threads revealed drafts I had written that Diane forwarded word for word under her own signature. The triage logs painted a before and after picture so clear, even the finance team would choke on their champagne when they saw it. Then came the final piece, a short 2-minute video I had stitched together. Nothing fancy, just a simple reel showing the backlog shrinking after my processes launched, layered with client feedback clips that said everything Diane's speeches avoided. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't emotional. It was factual, sharp, undeniable. I didn't caption it with accusations. I didn't need to. The header said it all. What improved responsiveness actually looked like. That evening, while Diane rehearsed her speech in front of a mirror, I sat in my apartment with my laptop glowing against the dim light. I scheduled the post to drop in the company's internal lounge channel at exactly 8:15 p.m., right when Diane would be standing at the podium, basking in applause. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. This was more than a post. This was pulling the curtain back on months of lies. It would sting Diane, yes, but more than that, it would force everyone to see me, to finally acknowledge the invisible backbone of their success. I clicked schedule. The screen confirmed it. The plan was in motion. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Not the numb kind of calm I'd carried since being excluded, but a sharper kind. Purposeful. It was the kind of calm you feel when you've already decided how the story ends. As the city lights flickered outside my window, I imagined the rooftop glowing with champagne flutes and hollow compliments. I imagined Diane raising her glass, smiling that smug smile. And then I imagined the buzz of phones lighting up across the room, faces shifting as the truth unfolded right there, in the middle of her perfect night. That image carried me to sleep like a lullaby. Tomorrow, Diane would finally learn that some people can't be erased. Tomorrow, her celebration wouldn't belong to her anymore. It would belong to me. The night of the celebration arrived like a storm I had been waiting for. The office emptied early, laughter spilling into the elevators as people rushed home to prepare. Sequins, ties, cologne, perfume. The scent of anticipation clung to the air. I stayed behind deliberately. Diane's request for me to cover support tickets had given me the perfect excuse. The truth was, I couldn't have forced myself to sit in that room, even if I had been invited. Watching her bask in the spotlight would have been unbearable. But this way, I could watch it burn from the sidelines. By 7:45 p.m., my phone was buzzing with photos in the group chat, co-workers snapping selfies under strings of lights, glasses of champagne clinking against the city skyline. Diane was front and center in every shot, smiling like the queen of her own kingdom. I pictured her rehearsed speech sitting in her clutch, the words she had probably practiced in front of her bathroom mirror, words written on the bones of my work, words meant to erase me forever. At 8:10, my hands hovered over my laptop, refreshing the internal lounge channel again and again, as if daring myself to cancel the scheduled post. My heart thumped in my chest, a war drum of doubt. What if this backfires? What if they call it unprofessional? What if I become the villain? But then I thought about the late nights, the way Diane leaned on me, then claimed the results as her own, the way she erased me from the celebration without a second thought. I thought about standing in that boardroom while she accepted praise for work I had done. And suddenly the fear burned away. At 8:15 on the dot, the post went live. The video appeared in the channel. 2 minutes of quiet, undeniable truth. No commentary, no accusations, just the receipts. Timestamps, version, histories, client feedback. My work laid out plainly with 6 names listed under mine, the ghost team no one had bothered to thank. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. My heart slammed so hard I thought I might faint. Then came the first reaction, a heart emoji from one of the engineers, then a fire emoji, then another. By 8:20, comments started rolling in. This is incredible. Finally, the real story. Can confirm this process saved my client last quarter. Finance chimed in. Revenue spike aligns exactly with these changes. This is the actual reason Q3 turned around. And then the DMs began. Is Diane okay with this being posted tonight? Honestly, this is the most accurate summary of Q3 I've seen. Thank you for putting this together. Needed to be said. I refreshed again and again, my screen lighting up like fireworks. But what I couldn't see, what I could only imagine, was the reaction at the rooftop celebration. I pictured it vividly. Diane raising her glass at the podium, delivering her polished speech, when phones across the room buzzed, faces bending down, scrolling, whispers rippling through the crowd like electricity, heads turning, not toward her, but toward one another, their expressions shifting from polite admiration to dawning recognition. I pictured the CEO's phone lighting up, his brow furrowing as he scrolled through the video, connecting dots Diane had worked so hard to scatter. I imagined partners glancing at her, confused, then skeptical. I imagined Diane faltering mid-sentence as she realized no one was listening anymore. The beauty of it was that I didn't need to be there to see it. The silence in the group chat told me everything. The photos stopped. The jokes stopped. The celebrations feed went dark. At 9:02 p.m., a single message popped up in the channel from the CEO himself. Great work to the operations team. This is exactly what accountability and innovation look like. No mention of Diane. Not a word, just the truth, acknowledged by the one voice that mattered most. My phone buzzed again and again. More DMs, more reactions. My name, suddenly visible in a way it had never been before. And as I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, the city glowing outside my window, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Diane had wanted me invisible. Instead, I had made myself unforgettable. Her celebration wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. The next morning, the office felt different. The usual post-event chatter was absent. No giddy retellings of who danced too much or which executive made an embarrassing toast. Instead, the air was thick, tense, like the quiet after a storm. I walked in expecting whispers. What I got was silence. Heads lifted when I passed. People who normally avoided eye contact stopped me in the hallway with small, cautious smiles. A few even nodded, subtle acknowledgments that carried more weight than any formal compliment ever could. By the time I reached my desk, I had 3 new emails flagged from leadership. The first was from the COO. Thank you for sharing the real process improvements. This kind of initiative is exactly what we need. The second was from finance. Would love your input on system changes for next quarter. And the third, short but seismic, was from the CEO himself. Let's schedule a one-on-one next week. I stared at the screen, pulse racing. For months my work had been invisible, and now, overnight, it had become undeniable. Diane arrived later than usual. She looked immaculate, of course, hair perfectly styled, clothes pressed, but her eyes betrayed her. She scanned the office quickly, her smile a shade too tight, her heels clicking with forced confidence. She called for a quick huddle at 10 a.m., trying to regain her footing. We gathered in the conference room, the same one where I had once sat invisible while she soaked up praise. She cleared her throat, her voice sharp but wavering at the edges. Last night was a great event, she began. I'm so proud of what we've accomplished as a team. The words hung in the air, heavy, brittle. No one rushed to agree. No one clapped. Instead, one of the engineers spoke up. The post last night was eye-opening. It really showed where the turning point happened. Heads nodded around the table. Someone else added, yeah, it was good to see the actual process laid out. Made everything click. The room shifted, subtly but unmistakably. The spotlight that Diane had clutched so tightly was no longer hers. It had moved permanently, and no amount of forced smiles could bring it back. Diane pressed on, but her voice cracked under the weight of the silence. Well, yes, of course the team contributed, she said, fumbling, her hands twisting against her notes. But leadership direction was also crucial. Direction doesn't mean much without execution, someone cut in softly. The meeting ended without fanfare. Diane left quickly, her heels striking the floor harder than usual. For the rest of the day, her office door stayed closed. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching her unravel was satisfaction enough. Over the next few weeks, the fallout became clear. Diane's name stopped appearing in leadership updates. Her big promotion, the one she had been angling for, vanished into silence. Rumors swirled quietly about credibility issues, about concerns over attribution. She wasn't fired, not immediately, but the shine was gone. The queen had lost her crown, and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, my world changed. I was pulled into meetings I'd never been invited to before. My input was sought out, my work recognized openly. The COO asked me to lead a task force on process improvement. The CEO, in our one-on-one, told me plainly, "We need more people like you, people who get things done, even without the spotlight." I left his office that day with a smile I couldn't hide. Diane had tried to erase me. She had tried to build her legacy on the back of my silence. And in the end, it wasn't anger or shouting that brought her down. It was the simple, undeniable truth. That truth had turned her celebration into her undoing, and it had given me the recognition I'd been denied for far too long. So yes, revenge was sweet. Not because I destroyed her, not because I embarrassed her, but because I finally stepped out of the shadows and into the light where I belonged. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a glass of champagne to do it.